Welcome to the Intentional Encourager podcast, where each episode brings you compelling conversations and stories designed to entertain, enlighten, and encourage. And now here's your host, Brian Sexton.
And welcome into the Intentional Encourager podcast. I'm your host, Brian Sexton. Thank you for joining us again today. Again, working through some video issues, but it's not going to affect the quality if you're listening to this audio version of the Intentional Encourager podcast. And it's a good thing that you decided to listen to the audio version today, because I have an absolute rock star with me today. He is killing it right now in all of his different platforms. And he is the author of the book Outrank. His company, SEO National, is doing some fantastic things. You can find them with search engines. We're going to talk about search engines and the power of search engines. And his podcast, Learning from Others, is a dynamic resource that you can go to as well. And I'd encourage you to check out his podcast called Learning from Others. He is the host of that podcast, the author of Outrank, so many other things. Damon Burton joins me today on the Intentional Encourager podcast. Damon, how you doing today, man?
Good, Brian. I appreciate the opportunity to chat. And I know before we hit record, we were talking about my little weekend trip with my son in San Diego. And I actually have a story from that I'll share with you, depending on
Go for it. Let's just do it now, man. Go,
just
share it. Yeah.
You know, you talk about obviously giving. And so there's a gentleman named Mo Gines. What's up, Mo, if he listens to this? And him and I connected on Facebook, and we've just kind of like encouraged each other. And he does his thing in health and fitness, and I obviously do my thing in SEO. And so we've just kind of hit up a loose friendship. And anytime I travel somewhere, if there's somebody that I genuinely have an interest in, I try and connect with them. So I sent him a message about 2 weeks ago, and I said, hey, I'm going to be in San Diego with my son. You want to just go grab coffee in the morning, and we'll just meet up for like an hour. And so I met Mo yesterday. And what's funny is I'm like the king of random gifts. And so anytime I meet somebody, I don't want to give like a half-ass gift or like a non-sincere gift. And so I try and come up with these bizarre things. And our West Virginia friend that I told you about, I sent her one of those squirrel picnic tables because she looks out her window all the time and she sees all these squirrels in her yard. So Mo being in fitness, me being in SEO, I ordered him this custom trophy that said, SEO National's most optimized website, but then I had website struck out and put body because he's a fitness coach. And so it says SEO National's most optimized body. And so he's posting it all over social media this morning, and me and him meeting up, and he was super cool. And you know, that's just me, but I kind of forget about how that's an icebreaker. And he even brought that up. He says, dude, this was so cool that you brought me this. And it meant so much that you take the time, because I obviously had to order it and proactively think about it and pack it and all this stuff. And he's like, man, that means a lot. And just the fact that this is such a good icebreaker, and you just forget about those things. And after that, that's the first time we met in person. We're like best buddies.
Yeah. Well, and Damon, that goes to what you and how you and I got connected, because you put a post on LinkedIn several months ago, and you said, hey, I'm looking for people that want to be I've got a podcast. If you want to be a part of it, let me know. Sharing your platform with other people, you were intentional about that. What was the impetus behind you really getting intentional to share something you built with so many other people?
Well, a lot of it's kind of similar to what you and I talked about when we were chatting the other day about, I don't really have, this is going to sound, some people are, what I'm about to say, they're going to be like, that guy's an idiot. But I don't really have a direction with my podcast, and that's intentional, because I just enjoy doing it. I enjoy the relationships.
Have you been eavesdropping on conversations that people have had with me? Like, this guy's an idiot, like myself. Like, this guy, is this guy an idiot? You know, I get said that about, you know, that's been said about me for years, but I wouldn't think that about you. You're a pretty brilliant guy. So.
No, I appreciate that. But I had this, a great example is I had an upcoming podcast guest, and she says, well, why do you do this? And I'm like, because I like to. And she says, well, aren't you, do you monetize this? Do you do this and that and this and that? And I said, sure, I've got business out of it, but that's just coincidental. And I finally, jokingly, but somewhat sincerely, I said, damn it, isn't just being happy good enough? And she's like, oh yeah. So, but the podcast was, you meet great people. I've had a lot of cool things come of it. And one example is my dad is a Minnesota Vikings fan. I have no idea why he's never been to Minnesota. He has now, but until I took him last year, he'd never been to Minnesota. He'd never seen a Vikings game. But the reason why I bring this up is because I met one of my podcast guests lives in Minnesota, and same kind of thing when I met up with Mo. I hit him up and I said, hey, I'm taking my dad to a Minnesota Vikings game. You're in Minnesota. While we're there, do you want to meet up? And it's just been like these really unique circumstances that you can't manufacture otherwise, that you're kind of gifted. That it's the best word I can come up with is wild card. I just like the wild card factor of meeting people on a sincere level with no ulterior motive behind it, and really just, hey, what's up, Brian?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Damon, that's the beautiful part about it, is because, again, you know, we you and I are, you know, we're active on LinkedIn. We do some stuff on Facebook and Twitter and things like that. And it feels like those platforms are more for what you can get from them than what you can give to them. Where have you found yourself really getting to those deeper levels in those platforms? Can you think of a specific interaction that had like an aha moment for you? Like, okay, this is why I do what I do, because of this. Was it meeting Mo, or was it connecting with the guy in Minnesota, or did you just have that moment where it just clicked?
Yes and no. I mean, I've always kind of been this way, where I'm cool with delayed gratification, and not having any expectations, and just kind of rolling with things. But then there was a moment. I don't have a specific moment, but over time I started to realize that there was a return in this, that I just came with the territory. And so that certainly, I wouldn't say it's not my motivator, but it reinforced, like, this is okay to do this and not expect things and meet people without trying to get engagement and business from them. And sure, it comes from it anyway, but that's just a bonus. And really, at the end of the day, it just is nice to meet people. If you want kind of a more extreme example, I went on a podcast, and a couple weeks later after it aired, I had this younger 20-something-year-old message me, and he said, hey, I just want to really thank you for being transparent and communicating that you can make the best out of bad circumstances. And then where it was really interesting is he starts to talk about, it really resonated with my eating disorder and my depression. I didn't say a single thing even remotely close to eating disorders and depression. Like, I was on there talking about starting a business and grinding it out and, being a dad. But something in that discussion where I was just like, here's my life and here's how I've made the most, the best out of the worst, resonated with him on a completely different level. And so the first thing I wrote back was, A, thanks. B, do you have the right Damon Burton? Because and I even told him, I said, because he was talking about health, and there's like a Damon Burton who, I think he's in college football now, and every once in a while I see his name pop up, and I said, are you talking about this other guy? And he said, no, it's you. And so you have no idea the way you're going to communicate and connect with other people. I'm a marketer guy. I'm a dad. Like, I don't have any dramatic stories, but I just come on and share what those stories are. And I think that at the end of the day, that's what we all want, is just to be like, oh yeah, okay, I'm not alone, or I can relate to that.
Well, and that's exactly why I started doing this podcast in this format, because and we were talking the other day when I was on your podcast that, there were a lot of guys out there that did expertise and sales and things like that. I'm like, that's cool. You go do that. I'll go do this, because I think everybody's looking for unique. I think everybody's looking for something different that they can go to and go, hey, this is not like everybody else. Like, you don't run your business like most people run their business. You didn't write your book the way most people write their book. And so that's the thing, is unique is always going to be marketable, right? I mean, that's what companies do. They iterate, they take the next version of what they're doing, because if they're repackaging the same old crap, well, guess what? It's still the same old crap. It's just repackaged. It's remarketed in some way or fashion. I got to ask you this. Through the pandemic, what's the biggest lesson that you've learned from this time? I mean, this all started for most of us, early to mid-March. Now, as we're recording this, we're in the verge of September. What's the biggest lesson you've learned through the last 5.5 months that was a real aha moment for you?
I'd probably have to answer it similar to the question earlier about at what point did you notice, giving was something you wanted to do. I've been very intentional about my whole life. And I was actually talking to Mo about this, and he was Mo's 25, I'm 39. And so he was like, how long have you been married? Well, what sparked his question was,
dude, you're 39.
Mm-hmm.
Good grief, man. I got whatever you're drinking out there where you live. I got to have that, man. I mean, I would, you look tremendous for 39, man. I'm just like, God love you. You got some killer genes and some good juice, man. Whatever's flowing through there.
You know what's weird about this? I appreciate that, but I've started to kind of know, like, once you hit, this is so funny, all these conversations that I had with Mo, because I said, dude, you got to grind it. So he goes, this will kind of touch on multiple things in one big circle. So he goes, when you had kids, what changed? Because he knew, so my oldest is 9 and I started my business 14 years ago. And so he goes, when you had kids, did it change anything? And I said, no, not for me, because I've been very intentional about my life. And so I'm the oldest of 7. I saw how quickly kids grow up. I took a lot of responsibility with my younger siblings. And so I knew what I would be walking into at the point when my wife and I had kids. And so we waited 5 years to have kids. And so I grinded everything out. And so when we did have kids, then of course I still grind it out, but it's on my schedule, and not on the schedule of somebody else's. And so he was talking about, I got so many things running through my head. I'm trying to keep this all in one linear discussion.
Hey man, we got plenty of time, man. All we got's time. So yeah, you go wherever you want to go.
Yeah. So he's asking, well, what changed? And I said, nothing really, because I wanted to grind it out before I had kids. So I did at the time my wife worked at a hospital. And so she woke up at 4 o'clock and I said, sure, I'll wake up at 4 o'clock. And so I'd, do the 20-hour days. And him just talking about what you go through and being intentional with your own life is something that I think people can take more ownership in. And I even went to coffee last week with a good friend as well. And he said, let's pause there. I'm losing. You edit this later?
Yeah, go.
I lost my train of thought here.
No, do what you got to do. Just keep rolling, man. You're good. Listen, we don't edit stuff out here. Editing's hard. Just we want a good conversation. But I'll say this. Let me jump in here. For a lot of people, Damon, the grind is what they live for, right? Mm-hmm. The grind is what they, you mentioned your wife get up at like 4 a.m. You grind it out for 20 hours a day. Man, at some point, when you do that, it's like we say here in West Virginia, if you're going to dance to the music, you got to pay the band. And at some point, you pay the band with your health. I mean, those things are just not good. But people just decide, if I'm going to get from point A to point B and I'm going to get to this level, that's what I got to do, man. I got to work harder than everybody else. I got to grind it harder than everybody else. When you were in your early 20s and you and your wife got together and you were grinding it for 20 hours, were there days that you just were like, why am I doing this? Or did you just power through the grind?
I just powered through it. This will be a good topic because I always had a fairly confident assumption that I would be self-employed, but I didn't know in what capacity. I certainly didn't know that SEO was a thing back then. But I think that contributes to the ability to get where I'm at today, is that I didn't force myself to pick a path. And so I often talk about I kind of dated my jobs and careers. And so when you're dating somebody, you go, okay, well, I like this part of the relationship and I don't like this. And so then as you move on to the next career, I said, okay, well, I don't like those things, so don't take that job, but I do like these things. And so then you date that job further. Mm-hmm. And so I kind of dated my careers until I said, okay, well, SEO is something that I like. It's something that will maintain my interest. It's something that can provide financial stability. And so I think there's a lot to be said about not forcing yourself to pick a path and kind of experiment. And probably even more so now with social media, because social media glorifies the whole entrepreneur story, as it should to an extent, but you don't know, as we said, the grind behind it. And there's all these kind of cliche sayings about overnight success usually takes about 10 years. And that's
Damon,
pretty accurate.
And I'll jump in here just real quick. People watch Shark Tank and they say, well, man, I've got a great idea, or I think I can do something there. And they see the finished product, but they never see all the steps that it takes to get that business to where, one, it's profitable, and two, the idea is marketable, and three, the idea is something that actually people want to buy. So you got to take those steps. And there are really, I watch Shark Tank or something, and I mentioned Shark Tank just because it has shown people, and I think to some degree, it's given a lot of people hope to be entrepreneurs. But in some cases, it's like it kind of makes it easy for people to be entrepreneurs, and it's not that easy.
Well, they think it is. Yeah.
Exactly. And they go, okay. And you look at it like, man, that's a really good idea. And the sharks go, but you haven't made any money, and you're kind of part-time investing in this, and it's not scalable. And when you take on an investor, they want their money, they want a return on investment very quickly. And so I think that it's never been easier to be an entrepreneur than it is today. But to your point, social media has created a false sense that it's really easy to be an entrepreneur today, when the same blocking and tackling concepts that it's always taken to be an entrepreneur never change, right? I mean, you go there for a minute, because I think there are people out there that go, man, I've got this really killer idea, and I think I can do something with it. I want you to go there for a second, because it's not that easy. I feel like we need to park on the grind.
Well, there's a couple things that come to mind on that topic, because the whole investor thing, I've watched from afar several friends build and sell businesses or take on investors. And I actually just had a conversation with a good friend on just 3 days ago. And when you take on investors, like, part of your love for that business is going to die. Like, it is going to rot away, because investors are in it purely for profit. They don't care one bit about your mission statement, generally speaking. And so when you sell a percentage, whether it's the minority or majority, you give up some of that control. And so I've never taken on funds, and, in the early days, sure, it'd be nice to accelerate things. But at the same time, like, you learn some really amazing things along the way. And we were talking about this last week. Like, you can take courses and have mentors and learn like bigger things and accelerate that learning curve, but it's the little things that are going to make a big difference that you pick up along the way. And if you take that money, like, you're going to shortcut a lot of that stuff, which may sound sexy, but it's going to bite you later. I mean, I have a couple friends now that have massive projects that took on multi-million dollars in funding, and they're killing it financially. He's only 3 or 4 months into the one gentleman I'm thinking specifically. He's only 3 or 4 months into the investor money that he's taken on. Financially, they're doing awesome. He's miserable, absolutely miserable. And that was just something that came between me and him. And he's like, dude, I'm thinking about exiting for this huge amount of money. And I said, first of all, congratulations. But you could feel on the phone call in his tone of voice that the money didn't even matter at this point. He was just so miserable.
Well, the air had been sucked out of the room, Damon. I mean, the minute that money came in, to your point, and I love what you said there about taking on investors. And I love where our conversation's going, because I think there are people that are listening to this conversation that are thinking in the back of their minds, investing in things or having people invest in them. And there's always a risk when you bring somebody else in to invest in something that's yours, because they don't see it like you do. It's dollars and cents. When you started your company, talk about mission statements. When you started your company, what was the one thing, looking back now 14 years later, that you say, man, if I could go back in time, I would do this instead of what I did when I started my company?
Not a lot. I've been asked this question before, and probably the closest thing I could come up with is I probably would have scaled a little bit sooner. So I can walk you through a little bit of the story. So when I first started my company, it was a one-man show for the first year and a half, because early 20s, self-employed, awesome. So that was good enough, And then after a year or two, I realized, well, I actually have something going on here. I should probably do something with this. And so then I started taking on VAs. And what happened is I was listening to, probably in the same general time span of a couple months, I listened to 4 Hour Work Week and then E-Myth Revisited. And so 4 Hour Work Week is about, how to build processes or how to kind of hack your business a little bit. And then E-Myth Revisited is how to make your business scalable and dependent on processes instead of individual people's skill sets. And so the combination of those at the same time, and ironically, at the same time, I had a VC company said, hey, we're buying this other marketing company, but they don't do what you do. What if we buy you both and kind of roll them together? And so I went and had this discussion just to see what it was all about. And I backed out of it. It was gross and slimy, and I didn't want to continue with it.
And for those for those in the conversation, I wanted to jump in there real quick. For those in the conversation, VC is venture capital. So basically, there are companies that exist to fund companies like your company.
Mm-hmm.
They'll come in and invest, and for a percentage of equity of that business or ownership of that business, they'll invest capital into that business. It can scale you or take your business to the next level. When you think about that, because again, a lot of people would say, boy, $100,000 cash infusion to what I'm doing now would be awesome. I mean, that would be great. And I could do X, Y, Z. You said just a minute ago, it felt gross to you. What about that process made your gut just kind of go off and go, man, this isn't for me?
There was the tangibles and the intangibles. I mean, the intangibles was it just didn't feel right. I couldn't put my finger on it. But then there was the tangibles where it was okay. And it was even much higher than, $100,000. But it was, all right, we're going to pay you out in a third. So a third cash, a third note, a third stock. When you start to really look at the potential liabilities and that type of payout, your third cash is your only guarantee.
Yeah, that's right.
A third stock, what I've learned since, what I had a feeling about and the way they presented it, and then when I went and looked up afterwards, was when they do stock, like they can roll this into like a shelf corporation and then run that into the ground to get your stock out, like, and leave you high and dry. Like, these guys are in it to suck every penny out possible. So they structure, not all of them, but certain venture capital companies can structure things in a way where they bring you on, it sounds sexy, they pay you cash, and then they strategically push you out. And it's just part of the equation for them.
They can take that shell corporation, Damon, to your point, they can take that shell corporation, move your stock to that corporation, issue you stock from that new corporation, and your stock, when you signed your deal with the parent company, could be, let's say, $50 a share. They move that stock, they transfer that stock to the shell corporation, run that in the ground, and your stock's worth $1 a share.
Mm-hmm.
You really take, And so, I appreciate you going there. I got to ask you this, though. And while you were telling me that, I'm like, man, that's something to look out for. What would 39-year-old Damon say to 25-year-old Damon starting his company? If you could go back in time, put your arm around your younger self, what's the one thing you would tell your younger self about starting the company?
Probably what I was heading towards about scaling faster. I don't have any regrets in the business. There's those little things that we talked about that you learn along the way, and I'm proud to have learned those, and I'm proud to own 100% of the company still, and I'm proud of the team, which brings me back to your pandemic question here in a moment. But I probably would have scaled quicker, is all. The same way, the same approach, but just sooner. Maybe instead of at year 4 or 5, at year 1 or 2. And I'd be curious where I'm at now. But overall, I'm super proud of where I'm at. And kind of to come full circle about your question earlier, when I was kind of losing my train of thought about what has the pandemic showed me, is that I'm really proud of how I built the company. Because my team, I have about 20 employees now, and half of those are over in the Philippines. And when the pandemic started, it was the first week of March, I was in the Philippines. And my longest team member is 11 years, and I have never met him in person. I've never met any of my team in person.
Wow.
And so I have 20 employees that I've never met in person. We talk all the time. We talk on Skype. We talk on the phone. And we can talk about my team members' weddings here in a minute too. But here we are, 14 years into a business, 11 years into my longest team member, and I meet them for the first time in the Philippines, half of them. And so I flew everybody in from different locations. We all came into this place called Palawan, and we had a hotel for like 10 days. And it was like we all knew each other, because there's probably a story in here about how you can really build a trusted team environment. Like, just because you're remote and you're decentralized, it doesn't matter. I mean, people can tell if you really care about them. So what the pandemic has taught me is that when it first started rolling out, I was proud that I could come to my team and satisfy their concerns. Their friends were getting laid off left and right, understandably. They understandably had concerns. They understandably were worried about providing for their family. And so it was really rewarding to be able to go, I don't have anything to worry about, and I did this the right way. While the world is falling apart, my clients are fine, I'm fine, my team's fine. And so it was kind of rewarding to say, yeah, to all the naysayers about whether it's like we talked about, take money, build it faster, or treat your employees like a commodity, or all the other things that you're kind of fighting up against in the traditional sense of business. I was like, no, I was right. Like I kind of got the last say in that environment.
Man, I got to ask you this, because you talked about the sense of calm that you had when the world was falling apart. And that's so beautiful, because again, you were in control of your own destiny. You knew that what you had was working and things like that. What were you hearing from your clients? Were your clients sharing that same sense of calm, or were they kind of freaking out themselves? And if they were, what was your message back to them?
It was surprisingly quiet. I didn't really get a sense of panic. We had out of all of our clients, we had one cancel and one ask to temporarily decrease their budget. The one that decreased their budget has since turned it back up and brought a second account to us. And then the one that canceled was they were in vacations and outdoor kind of adventures. So understandably that all got shut down. But they sent me a message about a month ago saying, hey, we're going to turn this back on in the fall. So I've essentially lost nothing. And then on top of that, we probably boarded, I think we're at about 8 new clients in this time span, awesome. Which is like more than we usually board in a year. We usually only get a new client. What's ironic is we're having a marketing company. We don't do any marketing of our own. We just grow by referrals. And so we only get a new client, maybe 2 or 3 new clients a year. So the fact that we've boarded 8 or new clients in the midst of a global meltdown really says a lot. So we didn't really have anybody come to us panicking. And I think that's for maybe 2 reasons. Definitely the smaller reason is I sent out an email and I just said, how are you guys doing? Like I just sent it out to all the clients, but it was very personalized and it said, I'm not pitching anything in here. I don't have an agenda in this email. I'm just really curious. Like some people are up, some people are down. Like, where are you guys at? And I ended it with, if I can send you anything to make you laugh, I will be talking about sending random gifts. I said, I'm the master of sending potatoes and piñatas and like all these random things.
Piñatas so full of potatoes. Yeah, that would be good.
Yeah, or add them together. Yeah. Yeah. I said, if there's anything I can do to just get a laugh and, just make the day feel normal for a day, let me know. And I had one client take me up and said, yeah, I'll take you up on the cupcakes. And so I sent him cupcakes. And so I think just bringing that peace of mind proactively helped a little bit, but that was definitely the minority. I think the bigger picture is that our clients know that we have their best interest in mind, and this can go into a bigger business conversation, but in times like the pandemic and in 2008, so I started my business in 2007, and then in 2008, obviously we had a recession, and from a business perspective, I don't have any negative memory of that time. I certainly remember the gray cloud that was over the world, but business grew. And I feel like that's kind of the same now because during these types of moments, people want to work with people that they either feel they have a relationship with and or know they have their best interest in mind and will stretch their dollar further. And so it's been very normal. It certainly feels different, but if I look at it on paper, like I got nothing to complain about.
Well, Damon, what you've hit on there before we dive into your life story, what you've really hit on there is the joy of business, because a lot of times you just reached out and said, "Hey, can I send you something that'll make you smile or make you laugh?" And a lot of times I think people forget about the joy of business. And it reminds me, and I used this quote on your podcast the other day when we were recording it, and I have to come back to it. Zig Ziglar said, "People love to buy, they hate to be sold."
Yeah.
Because there is an emotion inside of people that when they buy something they want and they get a great experience behind it, price might be they got a really great price and they're euphoric that they've put a few extra dollars in their pocket. But either way, when they're joyful about that experience, it does something psychologically in people. When they have a really good business experience, they're going to tell everybody about it. And so I love what you said about bringing the joy to business. I've got to park here for just a second before we get to your life story, because when did you know, have you always known early on that you wanted to bring joy into business when you did business with people?
No, it was one of those things where just every once in a while it was like, it would kind of just come into your mind where it's like, hey, here's an opportunity to make somebody feel better, or here's an opportunity to do something unique or stand out for the client. And so it was just the way I was, but I wouldn't say there was a frequency to it. And then when I realized that there was, standout moments that would come from that, then I started making it more intentional. So it wasn't something I proactively conceived. It was something that I just kind of did naturally though. But over time I was more aware of how good it made people feel just on the personal level. And I can't deny that there's business benefits to it, but that was after the fact, and it was a bonus. It was just, I don't know, I don't have an answer. It was just, one of those things that felt right.
And a lot of times the best things in business are exactly that way. This feels like what we need to do at this point, and it's a home run. It's just, you knock it out of the park. You mentioned your life in your story a little bit, and you alluded to a couple of things. I want to dive deeper there, because
Sure.
that's the one thing I love about the Intentional Encourager podcast and doing it is I want to find things about people's life. You mentioned being on a podcast and somebody was sharing with you afterwards about them having an eating disorder and depression that really, what you said really helped them. You're the oldest of 7 siblings. Take me back as far as you want to take me back in your life journey and some pivotal moments that really shaped the man that you are today and the business owner that you are today.
Yeah, I think the general story is that, I learned a lot of what I did not want when I became an adult. And I don't have super dramatic stories. I mean, a lot of people can relate that. So grew up till I was 7, moved a lot, I think as much as, twice per year when I was younger. And it was from one family friend's basement to another. And I can't fault my mom for, doing what she had to do to keep a roof over her head. But I definitely, there are she could have made more intentional decisions. But it is what it is. And so it wasn't like, there's no super sad story behind it, but throughout that experience as a kid, and even today in business, I learned probably most from what I saw other people do wrong or see things they went through that I didn't want to go through. Even some of my last employers before I started my company was just the most toxic environments to work in. And I said, I didn't want that if I ever had a business. And so it was like the same thing growing up, moving a lot. When we bought the house we're in now, when we bought it, it was my wife and I, we've been married for 14 years. And we bought this house 9 years ago when our oldest, so we have 3 kids. Our oldest was 10 or 11 months at the time. He was just shy of 1 year. And so there's 3 of us, me, my wife, and our 1 kid at the time. And we bought a 6-bedroom, 4-bathroom house that's 4,300 square feet, way bigger than we need.
Yeah.
But it was very intentional because I didn't want to move.
You know what they call that in West Virginia? They call it a mansion.
A mansion? Yeah. Well, I can't fault people for saying that. I mean, it's a nice house, right?
Yeah.
And so, but that was very intentional because I wanted to make that financial investment. And yeah, at the time it was like a tight squeeze to make it happen. I wasn't concerned, but it was more than I necessarily wanted to spend on a house. But now it's perfect because we've filled out every single room. So we have, my wife and I have a room, my boys have a room, my daughter has a room, I have my office that we're in, and then the kids have, like, my kids and wife have a craft room / pandemic work from home. There's your school room. And then we have a guest room. We have no extra rooms now, and we've filled it out perfectly. And so things like that are what I've really made a strong effort towards, is like, okay, how can I provide a better life for my kids? How can I provide a better life? And not to spoil them. Like, I don't buy them toys. I don't buy them gaming consoles every day. They want a freaking Nintendo Switch and every day it's no. And, I want to just give them roots and stability. And so that played a big part in me wanting to grind it out to be able to provide that stability for my kids. And then, like I said, with business, I've learned a lot, not from the good things from mentors, but from the bad things of people that did things that I couldn't respect, or that I watched them dig their own holes. And so I've always looked for opportunities as learning lessons. And so I never look back at like, oh, my life sucked, because it played a huge part in realizing the opportunities and circumstances that I probably would have missed otherwise.
I got to jump back here for just a second, because you mentioned earlier your dad's a big Minnesota Vikings football fan. Mm-hmm. What was that like? You said you'd never been to an NFL game. What was that moment like for you and your dad when you take him to, and the name escapes me, the big monster stadium there? Whatever corporate name they're calling it, but they had the Super Bowl. I mean, it's like it's unbelievable.
It's huge.
Yeah. What was that like for you and your dad to have that moment together where you were taking him to that first NFL game, and you could do that for him in that moment, Damon? I got to think that was so cool to do that.
It's awesome, and honestly, that's my thing. Like, I'm a pretty humble person. I don't buy, the reason why I say I'm humble is because I don't, like, my sense of excitement and, my equivalent to a Rolex watch is taking my dad to, like, seeing other people happy and experience new things is what I do. And I can give you a mile-long list of the things that I do. There's a gentleman that I met on, he was part of my Facebook group in Australia. And just like when I was going to San Diego and I knew Mo lived there and I hit him up, well, this gentleman was flying from Australia over to Vegas. And he says, "How far is Vegas from Utah?" And I said, "Close enough." And so I hopped on a flight and flew to Vegas and met this guy just because. But I went above and beyond that, and I surprised him. I said, "I'm going to pick you up at whatever, 11 o'clock in the morning." And, but he didn't know that I got a limo, and he didn't know that we went to exotic racing after that, because he's a big car fan. And so I paid to have him drive with a professional drifter. And like, it's the same thing with my dad. Like, I paid for him and my stepmom to come out and go to a game, and they didn't know, but my oldest son wanted to come. And so he flew with me, because we flew on different flights. So my dad went a day or two before me, and then me and my oldest son came out. And so when I got to the hotel room, it was like 1 o'clock in the morning. And so the next morning I paged my dad on the hotel phone, and I said, "Hey, come over to my room. I want to show you something." And then my son jumped out of the closet and was like, "Grandpa," like, it's just, I don't know. It's like super cool, but at the same time, it's just my thing. Like, that's just my thing. I really, I have a really great appreciation for like being able to provide unique moments and memories to people. And so I hate to downplay how exciting it was, but it's just my thing.
Well, and Damon, that's the thing is, when you have an opportunity to do something for somebody else, and for me, it's always cooler when I can say, hey, yeah, I've got a friend of mine that does this. Let me put you in touch with him. And it's like, oh man, that's exactly what I needed. Things like that.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't really cost you anything to just be a giver to people,
Mm-hmm.
and just to do cool things like that. I've got to ask you this in the time that we have left. Got to ask you, what's the biggest obstacle that you overcame in your life, and the greatest lesson you learned from that?
I could probably answer that from a business perspective and a personal perspective.
Yeah, take both of them. Go ahead.
So on business, it was kind of what we touched on earlier about scaling. When I realized, when I came out of that VC meeting, I realized, or I was reinforced, that businesses primarily want two things when they acquire another one. So one thing is they want to take the keys and run. So you have to have, turnkey processes. And then the other thing is they want to know where the fire is with the sales, so they could just throw more fuel on that fire. And so after that, I took and documented all of our processes. And so we had processes, but half were in my head and some were over in a spreadsheet and some were on this document. And so I sat down and consolidated them into a CRM, and that sucked. That sucked majorly. I mean, it took like a year. So on top of working your regular business hours, on top of being a dad, on top of being a husband, it was like another 2 to 3 hours every other day for a year. Because when I documented those processes, I wanted to do it once, and other than needing to make revisions down the road, like never do it again. I didn't want to half-ass it. And so that was rough, but it's the best thing ever now, because we are like, I can push a button and fire off 150 tasks to my team anytime we launch a new client. So business, that I would say that personally, about 3 years ago, I got an autoimmune condition called eosinophilic esophagitis. So I'm gonna have a pop quiz on that tomorrow on how you spell that. Got it?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I mean, so, hey, listen, you lose most people in my state when you got to the E. People
well,
like myself, I'm like, wait, what? Carry the 4, yeah.
We'll call it EOE for short. So
EOE.
I acquired this condition, and basically the abbreviated explanation of it is everything that I eat hurts really bad. And so there's no cure for it. There's like, Band-Aids I can do to help get in, eat when I can eat and things like that. But that's something I'm still going through and trying to figure out, because I think I've adjusted as much as possible and found kind of my new norm. But that's kind of a struggle for me, because I've always been very algorithmic, where I'm like, okay, like here's where I am now, here's where I want to be, and reverse engineer the solution. So like, how do you reverse engineer a solution for something that there's no cure for? Or how do you adjust your life for no longer being able to eat this and only eat that? And, how do you decide what to eat based on what hurts the least instead of what you want to eat? So that's been something that's, I think is more mentally exhausting than physically. You would think I'm sure a lot of people listening understandably are saying, oh, that would suck and that would hurt. And it does, but it's like the 24/7 mental exhaustion of, do I eat that now because I'm hungry, or do I not because it's going to hurt after?
Well, you not in the same vein, but I had weight loss surgery 11 and a half years ago. Mm-hmm. And I used to be able to sit down and eat a bowl of ice cream, not think anything about it, or eat a bowl of cereal. Just take regular 2% milk or whole milk, whatever, eat the cereal, not think anything about it. Now, because of the sugar content, I'm like, listen, I'm going to foul myself up big time if I eat this. And so it's like, I might eat cereal a couple times a year, if that, 2 or 3 times a year. And I got to really be careful. Or I look at, if I want a candy bar, I'll look at how many sugars in the candy bar, because I'm like, I don't want to be not to be gross, but I don't want to puke my guts out over a candy bar, So I understand some of that, because you really have to train your brain to know what's going to hurt you and what's not going to hurt you, and where you can go and because when I first had my weight loss surgery, there were like, for 2 months, my doctor was like, yeah, you're pretty much on a liquid diet.
Yeah.
Like, you're really eating you really have to really be careful what you eat. And so, I mean, I've been there, but what was with EOE, I've got to park here for just a quick second. With EOE, how has that made you sensitive to helping others with a similar condition? Have you really been able to be more empathetic, or just really give to a higher level with people that are struggling with those physical ailments?
For sure. Yeah. It's definitely something that you're more aware of. And you realize the magnitude of, I think what it's underscored for me is that what we all know, that everybody's going through something. But for it to be something so simplistic as eating really kind of made me more in tune with that concept of everybody's going through something, and being more sympathetic to it. Because if I were to tell somebody else without the whole story and just be like, oh, I got EOE, and give them a really vague response of, I got to watch what I eat, then half the people probably just go, but like, if I really went into it, then most people would be like, holy crap, that's the worst thing I've ever heard.
Or if you look like me and you're a big guy, and there people, I'd be like, yeah, I got to watch what I eat. They're like, yeah, sure, Tubby. You really, yeah. It looks like you've been watching it go from here down to your gut, and that's what it was when I was 360 pounds. It's like, yeah, I'm trying to watch what, of course you're trying to watch what you eat, but but yeah.
I've tried to be more patient with, I'm kind of contradict myself a little bit, because I'm very patient. I'm very understanding people, but there's some things where I have short patience, and it's largely like, if you have a problem and you know the solution, then the solution's right there. And so it's made me more patient in some of those circumstances where it's, I've never been the one to care about people's weight, but like, maybe that's a good example, is if in an extreme example, it was like, well, I'm overweight and you want to lose weight. In that example, I'd be like, okay, well, go lose weight then, or go exercise, or go eat healthier. And that's probably a horrible example, because I never go down that path. But that same type of concept is, well, I have this problem in my life, and there's a solution. And I'm always, before I would be like, to me, it was very black and white. Like, there's the solution.
Yeah.
And so I've been much more patient with that gray area of people's individual circumstances, to be more sympathetic. And I understand the mental components that come with it. But, and even in my own respect with EOE, like I said earlier, I always look for the positive. So I've taken this as an opportunity to eat way healthier. I was never like a horrible eater. Perhaps maybe slightly better than the average American, but now I've eaten, I eat way better. And so I've looked at this as an opportunity to say, okay, well, let's structure my diet in a way where I get my nutrients, my calories that I need, but let's do it without the things that I don't need. And so I try to look for the positive in things.
You do realize you're talking to a guy that lives in a state that we have a restaurant chain, Damon. It's called Tudor's Biscuit World. From 5 a.m. to like 3 p.m, they're selling biscuits and gravy. They're selling comfort food. They're selling, and we've got like 50 of them in the state. And it's like, all right, no wonder we're the most obese. No wonder West Virginia is the most obese state in the country, because we're always running to the biscuit place or the donut shop,
Dude, it's hard. It's hard because I still want that convenience, especially being a business owner and, grinding it out. Like, when I want to sit down and eat, you know what I've totally written off lately is, there's those healthy food meal deliveries like Green Chef and Blue Apron or whatever it is, which are awesome. Mm-hmm. Every couple months, like maybe every 6 months, I'm like, yeah, I should order that because it's healthy. And then when I sit down to prepare it, I'm like, this sucks. I don't have the patience to sit down and, like, I don't want to chop up the the celery and then mix it with the onions. And so I still have to battle the health. I'm much more health conscious, but I still don't have patience for
Well,
I need
a
convenience
lot of
too.
that stuff is sexy for people because it's like, oh, look what we got in this box, and we're gonna, the marketing is designed to where it's like, oh, you can cook at home and things like that. Listen, man, if I put in a 12 or 13-hour day, I want to grab a pizza, because it's like good, and I can imagine if somebody that grinds it out a little bit longer, they're just looking for something, man. It's like, I'm hungry. What's available? It's
I
like
just
that.
started dumping the
Yeah.
whole damn bag into the pan.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's like, I think, oh, this will work, yeah.
It can't be that far off.
No. Yeah. Smidge, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
I want to end on this because, again, we end every podcast with this, but especially with you. And, man, I so appreciate your time being with us today. What's your biggest piece of intentional encouragement for the audience?
I would, a couple things come to mind. Earlier we talked about, I would say be comfortable in exploring, whether it's, your career or something else you're going through. Don't feel like you have to commit yourself to a path and then end up, and some of the most miserable people in the world are the people that prematurely committed to something that they thought would make them happy. And when they actually get into it, it doesn't. So don't feel like obligated. Mo is a great example. He says, I'm 25, my family's bugging me to get married and have kids. And how old were you? And I said, I got married at 25, but we waited 5 years to have kids. And all 3 of our kids were, we were ready at the time. And I would say that that's okay to, break from whatever the traditions are, or in most circumstances, it was cultural pressure. And I would say do what's right for you. And one of my team members recently got married, and he's in the Philippines, and he asked me to be their godfather. And that's twice I've been asked to be a godfather for somebody in the Philippines. We didn't talk about, I'll give you a quick story.
Yeah, go
4
ahead,
years
man.
ago, 4 years ago, 2 of my team members, they're a couple, got married. And at the time my wife was pregnant. And so they invited us to go to the wedding, but I didn't want to go halfway across the world while my wife was going to be due any moment. And so we jokingly said, why don't you do a life-size cardboard cutout? They got a life-size cardboard cutout of Damon. And so here I am, like this 6 foot tall cardboard cutout over like 5.5 foot line of Filipinos. And there's a card, like, how much does that have to say that somebody was willing to invite an artificial you in a real wedding line? And I'm in all these pictures, like I'm in the wedding as a cardboard cutout.
Dude, you're a revolutionary, because now every major league, you see baseball games
I know,
with these
isn't that
cardboard
funny?
cutout. Yeah, you see the cardboard cutouts of people. It's like, look, you could have done this 5 years ago and been like, hey, don't have the opportunity to go to somebody's wedding halfway across the country. Save your money. Send a cardboard cutout of yourself.
Cutout. Yeah, it's crazy. So, and so these guys, more than once, somebody's asked, like, hey, you've been married for a long time, you're happy. What's your opinion? And to come full circle, I tell them, do your own thing, and take and don't take the advice that you want from others, including my own. Like, ignore my advice if it doesn't resonate with you. Like, here's what I think sounds good, and here's from my outside perspective what might help. But if you disagree, then disagree. Like, just be patient and do your own thing and pick your own path, and don't feel obligated to corner yourself into other people's expectations.
Man, what a great way to end this podcast. I have enjoyed this conversation, man. We've gotten into so many different things, which is what I wanted to do. And so I appreciate you being transparent and being open and sharing your story. Go to LinkedIn, find him at Damon Burton, DAMON BURTON, or you can also visit his company's website, www.seonational.com. Find him on Twitter at EntrepreneurDB. That's ENTREPRENEURDB. Damon Burton, man, this has been so good. Thank you for joining me today on the Intentional Encourager podcast.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Brian. Thanks so much.
My thanks as always to producer Bryce Sexton and technical advisor Matt Means. And the ultimate thanks goes to the Lord Jesus Christ, who provides intentional encouragement every day through His Word. And until next time, remember, everyone, everywhere, at any time, and any place can be an intentional